We are back. This is our third piece of our conversation around Story from the Core about communication. And here with Chris and Mary Beth and myself, Tina O. And here's where we get to what's going to happen in this program.
Probably should have got to this first, but anyways, it's okay.
Who knows what order they're going to listen to it in. And there's a lot of pieces, right, to this. If we were thinking about all the different people that we've worked with and our own body of work and what are people hungry for. And what we know for sure is that there's a whole pool of you out there that are ready to deliver a message on a stage. And there's a whole pool of you out there that are ready to deliver a message in a book. And there's almost everyone out there is aware that their online presence matters and that their online communication matters. So those are the three arenas that this program goes into. And each person who takes this is going to be wanting, perhaps, they're going to be hungrier for one more than the other. And that's okay. But the three key deliverables are your book, your keynote, and your online strategy for who you are in the best way, in the most energetic, alive way that you show up, and aligned way that you show up online. Where should we start? Do you want to start with what happens in phase 1? Maybe, does that work?
Well, maybe we should start about how we work together.
Sure.
Or what it would mean for someone to work with
oh my gosh, I'm working with 3 people. How does that even work, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I think for me, a really big part of that is Tina, Mary Beth, and Chris, we work in support of one another. Mm-hmm. And Tina mentioned something earlier about blind spots, and she was like, well, wait a second. This isn't my blind spot. It's just not my wheelhouse. It's your wheelhouse. Mm-hmm. Right? So we all, hopefully between the 3 of us, we deliver a much more clear picture. And we are, even though you might work with Chris one month and Tina the next month, you're actually still working with all 3 of us because we are always in communication and sharing the story as it develops and grows.
And I think that's a really key piece, that one of the things that all 3 of us do is we all move into a listening state and stage with each of you, of the participants. And I think we broke it down into, there's always a collecting stage, right? Where we're collecting the information of, let's say we're working on the book and we're specifically jumping into what Mary Beth and I call the engine room, which is really the initial impulse that drove you to write the book. And in that impulse is usually all of the ingredients necessary for the whole book. So we might go into a state of listening around the engine room. And it might be that in that time they're working with Chris, you're working with Chris. So he's in the listening state of that with you. And then, so we collect the information, right? And then we listen as a threesome about that, what happened in that collecting. And then we land it, and we land it with you, the client, the participant who's the communicator. And we do tend to follow all of those 3 steps, depending on, even if you're working with Mary Beth first, we collect, right? We collect, we land, we listen, and we land. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay.
So should we move into phase 1 now?
We're collecting your coughing, cookie crumb in his throat. So the biggest piece that you're going to be working on as a participant is your book. Your book takes the most time. So right through stage 1, 2, and 3, we're working on your book right from the get-go. And so Mary Beth and I have a process called Book in a Box. There's another name coming, but that's the one we've got right now, which is writing your book via writing prompts to get the first draft up and out. And as well in the first section, there's a lot of listening into the soulful place. And Chris will speak to that, but why don't we just talk a little bit about Book in the Box while we wait for Chris to come back. You and I have worked a little bit with someone doing this process, and what have you noticed about it, Mary Beth, the Book in a Box?
Well, I think thinking about where it came from, and I actually really like the name Book in the Box, because it's all about creating the container where someone can put the pieces in.
Right.
Every day I'm going to put one piece in, and eventually it's going to be full. And it's, you know, it's you get your Lego kit for Christmas, and you still have to follow the instructions and figure out how it all fits together, but it's making sure that all the pieces are there.
Right. And so in phase 1, there's writing prompts that's directly connected to the reason they're writing this book.
Yeah.
Right? There's directly connected to the turning points in their life or their work that moves their book forward, which
And creates the narrative structure.
right, and which beautifully connects with Chris's work in phase 1, which is that collecting stage of what are they bringing to the table right now, and turning points have a lot to do with that. Can you speak a little bit, maybe Chris, to the first stage of working with somebody?
Yeah. The first kind of the foundational piece is what we call the soul reading, which really looks at the deep elements, contributing kind of attributes that, in my way of thinking, really come together to create a kind of a view, what we might call a blueprint, at the level of the soul, right? The soul, us souls, otherwise this very elusive, potentially ethereal sounding, often the, ethers somewhere. And this gives it an ability to talk about what are the deep currents, what are the things that you can't not do that are propelling existentially at the core of one's being through life. And it doesn't give okay, so you should be X and you should be Y, you should be a doctor, you should be a lawyer, blah, blah, blah. It's not that level of, it's not a personality profile. it's or a career test. It's what are the core elements that come together to create one's being. For some people, that might be an alignment to the creative process is what really drives them. For other people, it might be liberation. For other people, it might be a work of bringing the world back into wholeness. Mm-hmm. And we figure out which are these kind of driving factors in a person's being, and based on that blueprint, we get an incredible view into the inherent strengths as well as the built-in challenges. So every blueprint, every structure comes with its inherent gifts as well as its inherent areas of challenge and potential red flags for self-sabotage or undermining oneself or social conditioning. And we can actually build practices to help to cultivate the strengths and to create resilient health and capacity around the areas that would otherwise be challenged.
So it sounds like in phase 1 with you, it's really about owning the instrument, if you will, that the communication's coming out of.
And building a strategy and a series of practices that are specifically tailored based upon that person's unique profile.
Right.
That's where, to me, it has real efficacy and stick and traction, because it's not, hey, you should try meditating or you should try this. It's not this kind of generic thing. It's very attuned, very specific, very refined strategy and practice and instruction based that will actually resonate with a person because it's actually based on their deep system.
And I love that you're using the word strategy and practice, because one of the things that Mary Beth and I have encountered with the authors that we've worked with is that they're all trying to get to this state where the words just come.
Right. And
they're all trying to get to that place where the clarity comes, because there's too many words.
Yeah.
And so this directly will impact that and make it free everybody up right from the get-go. We're like, this is what you're bringing to the table.
Yeah.
And so then the piece for me in phase 1 is all about the I would call it the human, the right now experience of how you're living out that energetic makeup of you, and I call that core story. And it's really about landing in what I call your core medicine and your core poison, or I call it the double-edged sword of your core story. And knowing that, the visual that I use is you come into the world as a story stone, and you've got this like message on the stone, and as it plops in the water, the ripples of your story is the carrier through your life. And knowing that you might come into the world with what you give the world is you are enough, but the other side of it is your poison is I'm not enough. Right. And when we can identify that, then we know that you as the source of the communication, that's the edge you're going to be walking, and that is one of the drivers underneath the communication that you're giving to the world. So that you have a core story as the writer and the speaker, but then your book that is called to you, that has called you to it, also has it's like part of your ripple, and identifying what that medicine or poison is, and helping to keep you on the track of the message you're here to give the world. And then we also just go through what I call the who, what, when, where, why, and how of your book. Really, it's like the spine of your book.
That's very book in the box kind of thing.
And then we go into book in the box as Mary Beth. Yeah. So that's phase one. Do you feel like, did you have anything you want to add there? Because I really think your big part comes in the engine room in part two, and a lot in phase three. But did you want to add, is there anything you need to add to phase one?
All good.
Okay. So that's phase one. We've started your book. We've done the reading. We've done the core story piece. We've got some turning points.
And what did we say? Each phase is technically 4 months, but it's 3 months of work or something like that?
It's the great thing is every person in this is going to have their own rhythm, but really phase one's about 4 months, I think. Phase two is 6 months. And then phase three, I think, is around 4 months. And the idea is that it's a 12-month program over 14 months, because we're human beings and we need breaks. And as much as we think we can work every day for 12 months, we can't. We need a break.
And we need to do other things.
So phase two, this is where your keynote starts to take shape, because we're going to work on your engine room chapter of your book. And the engine room, as we kind of mentioned in phase one, or in the beginning of this, is that the engine room really is the essence of the scene. It's like the scene that called you to write this darn thing in the first place. And that's also your keynote. Phase two is also, we move into what came up in our last conversation. We talked about like the core resistance, or the shadow, if you will, or the soft bits where the power is. And Chris, do you want to speak a little bit to that? About what that's like?
Yeah, well, I mean, you were naming there in terms of core story work in phase one, where they're getting to medicine and poison. You know, that to me, that's like transitioning into phase two, which is we see, say in the soul reading from my seat, we see the essence, right? We see the blueprint, we see the light, and that's inevitably going to create contrast and shadow. That's what light does, which isn't a bad thing. It's something that can be either worked with well, or it will become the consistent stumbling block and obstacle and internal resistance and undermining of self. And that's where we have choice. We don't have choice about the fact that if we're going to connect in and light up, that there's also going to be some reflections of where the light isn't yet fully penetrated or expressed. And so that's just, it's helpful to think of that not as a personal thing, because this is where it can get sort of snarled for people, is like, given deep conditioning around shame that most people live with, and been trained into, that like, I did something wrong. This isn't the like story of the world, like, oh, but it's not supposed to go like this. It's just supposed to be like leaping to higher and higher heights and perfection. And what's this now? But actually, this is where the story really can gain power in traditional kind of understandings. The journey into the underworld is to retrieve power, to find the medicine gift. It's not a detour. It's not a mistaken path. It's not a problem that we need to solve. it's actually other aspects of one's being that want to come alive, that are currently somewhere off in the periphery or have been kind of sent down into the basement or whatever, and we create really safe space to let those voices also come and have them eventually start to be harmonized to the deepest voice.
This lens makes me, I don't know what's going on in your head, Mary Beth, but to me, this is all, like, this is where you come in. Because one of your strengths, I love your obsession with details. And it's in those details that might be in the basement, right? Or those details where we're working with an author and they'll look blah 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 this, and your brain goes what, and what's that thing about that button in your pocket? And the person's going, button in my pocket, and you're like, what is that? And can you speak a little bit to the power of details in our writing, in our speaking, and why they matter and where they can take us in our writing?
Well, I think we all have memories of reading books, or, we're like, oh, too many details. I don't need to know that much about what the weather was that day. So let's acknowledge that there can be too many details, but I think in our storytelling, a critical piece is knowing what the relevant and important details are, and those often tend to be overlooked. And I think that's where some coaching or exterior listening can be really helpful, because you've told a story to yourself so many times that you've glossed over so many things, and it doesn't make sense to other people unless we know certain specific details.
And you have a skill of detective work around details. Like when I think about amazing keynotes, nobody leaves a keynote talking about the impact of what that keynote did for them. They end up leaving the keynote talking about a really interesting detail that happened to that person, and it's in that detail that the impact is actually experienced. And can you speak?
I mean, that's you and I in our work together, we deal with that all the time, like show don't tell, right? What's the detail that tells that story, or one tiny prick of light in the darkness that makes everything clear. Right? So it's being able to find those things, hone in on them, or it might be finding those details that lead to the next detail and the next detail and the next detail, and eventually create a coherent picture.
I think what you're speaking to here, if I think of just like hard and fast tangibles, because the three of us could really talk about our passion for story and writing for hours, but in equipping a writer or a speaker, an influencer, whatever it is that whatever language speaks to you, words that speak to you, it is what are we anchoring into? What are we anchoring into as the storyteller, and what are the anchors we want to give to our audience that connects those anchors to us?
Right. It's that tangible piece again, right? Like, I wasn't there with you in that place, so how can you, as the storyteller, as the speaker, as the writer, whatever, bring me to that place,
right?
So I can truly understand it,
right? And then is there also something to, in the writing and the speaking, knowing which details are fully alive? Like you could have, it's like going back to my splatter paint thing. I could be an expressive and splattering a zillion details, or I could give you 8 details that you could track my whole story based on these 8 details of the book or of the. I'm thinking about myth work right now.
Just think about actually that sentence I posted for you. I posted that just for you, by the way, just the other day. And I believe the sentence was, like any artist without an art form, she was dangerous.
Like any artist without an art form, she was dangerous. So with
right,
like any
how can
writer,
we say so much in 10 words? Right? That's what we're going for. It's that clarity, that precision in details, in words, that every word matters.
Yeah.
And so we're going to make sure we have those right words to matter the
Right.
most, and we don't have the ones that don't really count.
Like any communicator, without a word?
The right word.
Without the right word, they are dangerous. Ugh.
They're not dangerous.
I call those ding, 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 ding
It's
moments.
the right words that make you dangerous, Tina.
Beautiful. Dangerous in a good way.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's phase 2, where we're getting right to the heart of what we're communicating, the engine room, in our details, in our light and dark, and we're in the place of our power, right? And there's power in our details. And we've got our keynote. So we're still working on our book. Mm-hmm. So now we're on phase 3, and phase 3 is very much about the embodiment and the delivering. So now we are, depending on the writer and how their authorship is coming, some may be finishing their first draft, some may be already moving into their third draft. Really depends on how that flow state is for them. The keynote will be polished, and so in this third piece, we're now getting on our feet. And we're going to do an event where you actually will give a keynote. And tell us about that, Chris, because I'm really curious I love this whole piece of presencing and like embodying ourselves.
Well, yeah, I mean, from the piece that I'm sort of bringing, we've put a lot of emphasis on knowing and recognizing and appreciating the nature of one's makeup, having precise intelligence about the inherent strengths and the areas of some challenge, delved into some of those areas of challenge and find in them a surprising sort of paradoxical grace, if they're handled right, and power. And then so it's a lot of, from phase 1 and phase 2, it's a lot of internal work, of internal alignment. And then phase 3 becomes the fun game of having found one's internal alignment, can you stay in touch with it while also being connected to other people? And that's a new area of fun and opportunity / challenge. Sometimes it's relatively easier for some people, it's a little more difficult for others, but the capacity is always there for anybody. To some people, when I kind of turtle in and now they feel this really deep connection to themselves, but they kind of don't care so much about staying in resonance, or do they too quickly kind of shoot out into everybody else and lose touch with their own kind of center? But to be able to stay centered in oneself while also open and connected and resonant, whether we're thinking in a writing form, but especially in thinking of a speaking form in a live format, the ability to stay in touch with your own internal guidance while also reading the room and responding in real time, that's the power. And that's the focus that I would bring to help people with that. And then content and the rest obviously is handled through some others.
I also see this a bit about risk management.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point.
I think Tina and I, we just had a conversation with one of our clients the other day about saying, okay, so now you have to really put it out there. You have to risk telling us your deepest, darkest, and the things that might actually burn. Right. But also know that between us working together, we're going to keep you safe, and we're going to tell you when it might not be appropriate to take those risks.
Mm-hmm. Like in the creative process, take them, but maybe not for the public.
Exactly.
But all of a sudden, there's
but
embers.
we need to know where those deep dark places, like which ones we're going to risk, how we're going to package them. Yeah. And it's like what delivery can we make, the impact, what delivery can we make that we can stand by? Yeah. That's what can we give to the world that is truly us, as Chris said, but also can be received.
Yes. And this goes into your mastery around what we call, what you and I joke about bulletproofing. We're like bulletproofing our communicators.
Right.
So that no matter what audience they're standing in front of, or no matter who's reading their book, that and no matter what's coming at them, that they've done all the work. They've done all the work they needed to do. There's no dark corners they haven't gone into. There's no research threads that they haven't followed. So if something isn't received well, should it come back to the author, which of course it would at some point, that the author, you as the author or communicator can go, I did my work, I'm good, I'm solid. I'm solid. And I suspect, Chris, you might even have some work around that to help people moving forward. To sort of stand in, I call it like the bubble, right there. Their bubble shield of I don't know, what would you call it? Like, it's because it's really exposing, putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
Do you want to add anything to that? I mean, I have pieces that, I don't know, I think sometimes I'm just a little bit fearless, because my whole thing is if you're standing in your core, then you're already protected. But I also recognize that we're human beings and we're out there. Anybody want to add anything about taking care of themselves? In this stage where you're right, we're saying, own it, stand it, be it, see it, and be seen.
Yeah, and I think a key part of that is to really clarify, and this process is here to assist in that, but like to clarify in the moment of speaking or in the moment of writing, yes, I'm looking for my resonance, yes, I'm looking for connection, but this isn't my whole life. Mm-hmm. You know, this isn't the end all be all. I always like to say it's purposeful, but don't say like, this is my purpose and this is the only reason that I was put on this planet to do this thing. And like, you might also want to have fun with your friends. You might also want to connect with people. You might have a family. You might have time that you want to spend on your own, or places, things you want to do just for pure enjoyment. That don't have to be, I have to give my gift to the world and I have to, like, there is a time and a beauty and a deep heart and a care and a service behind that intention. And also it's cool to relax from that. And so, like, you know, it's like entering the zone. And then you can step out of the zone and have a life.
Beautiful.
Beyond it. Inclusive, but beyond it as well.
Which to me sounds a lot like, I know you're not talking about this, but it's kind of like editing, which is also what's happening in this stage, right? We're editing their book.
We're going to let go of some things too in this stage,
right? Yeah.
And create a bit of distance. And
that's a really good point. In this stage, we're actually creating the distance because we're about to give it to an audience now, right? So what is safe distance? I really like what Chris said before. It's like, stay true to yourself, but also it's like, you're giving it to someone else.
Right.
It's not all about you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It just comes from you. It's again, let's go back to it. You are a story. You come from a story. You have
a story.
This is about having your story and giving it to the world.
Yeah. It's beautiful. I think in this piece too, you Mary Beth, when you and I get to the stage with an author, we call it their musicality, right? Like this is the playfulness now. Now we actually are dancing in the personality piece. Yeah. We're like, okay, there's a little bit of entertainer maybe if that's your thing, or maybe storyteller if that's your thing, but it's like really figuring out what is the public offering of this soulful piece. And I think that's very key for those of us who are here and feel like we're called to give this message to the world. There's a public version of yourself and a public version of your work that is meant to reach many, many, many people. And so what does that voice sound like? So we're moving into that arena. So as we close this up, I think the main pieces for our readers and our listeners right now are that you've got 3 passionate story people here for you. We are working with 4 people only for the next 14 months, which means you have us. We are there for you. We are your team for that period of time. Your key 3 deliverables. We didn't talk about the online space. That's my ballpark. And that's, again, I think we dabbled into it around the whole public piece. So we're writing your book. We are delivering your keynote. and we are creating a strategy for your online presence out there, your very public self out there. And hours wise, I think we're it's just think of it like you have lots of workshop time, as in I think of workshop not in physical space, like you got to be with us, but there are immersive times in your month, and there are space times in your month where you're doing the work, and then we gather again with individual coaching. So you get us individually, and you also get us as a group, and we'll send you some details to follow. Is there anything we want to close with? Anybody? Anything? Let's just each have a closing little piece. Your story matters. Mm-hmm. That's it. For me, your story matters, and you're made as something for that something to live in the world, and that matters. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think of it like a high school Venn diagram, and we've got these 3 circles of the 3 of us, but also you as a circle. How many math we could do in the book and the message. But really, the point I want to make there is like there's an intersection point, there's a nexus point where the gifting of all of the 3 of us who are coming together and your gifting meet in a magic place. And I'm really fascinated to see the emergent possibility and power of that manifest.
Beautiful.
I think we've said it all.
You always say that.
I'm going to be the concise person in the room. How about that? Another one of my roles.
You like the mic drop? Can we just turn this off?
I don't know. I also think it's just harnessing energy and from all the various places and bringing it together to create something that's true.
Imagine that communication that's true. Let's play that game.
Wow.